acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 within the Mississaugas of the Credit and is within the territory of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your participation today. We have two projects before us today. The first one is to 2400 to 2440 Dundas Street West. It's the first review of that one, and after a short break, we will review the second project, which is 110 Adelaide Street East, and that's the second review. To introduce the first project, agenda item 1, again, 2400 to 2440 Dundas Street West. This is a rezoning application, as well as the first review of the project, or the proposal. There is 1 hour and 30 minutes scheduled for the review. It is a formal review session, and there will be a vote taken at the end. Staff have been given 10 minutes for their presentation, and that'll be followed by a 15-minute presentation by the applicant. Discussion to follow both of those. A reminder that the session will be live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. The recording will be available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. I'm now going to do a roll call. I'm going to ask the panel members to confirm that they are participating in the review and whether they have a conflict of interest with the project. Jim Goff.
Present, no conflict.
Jessica Hutchin.
Present, no conflict.
Olivia Keung.
Here, no conflict.
Paul Kulig. Oh, we're missing Paul. Okay, Heather Rolston.
Here and no conflict.
Okay, and I am going to, well, let's just hope Paul joins us shortly. Is that him? Yes. Okay. Paul, I was just texting you. Can you confirm that you will be participating in this review of 2400 to 2440 Dundas Street West, and whether you have a conflict of interest?
I do not have a conflict, and I will be participating.
Thank you very much. Some reminders before we get started. For the panel members, don't forget the staff questions, which will be shown at the end of their presentation, and to provide commentary on both issues of concern and appreciation. To the presenters, I will verbally, I'll give you a verbal signal when you've got 1 minute to wrap up your presentation. Okay, so finally, let's begin with the staff presentation, please, and kindly introduce yourselves before you begin. Julie?
Sure. My name is Julie Bogdanovich. I'm an architect and urban designer in the South District, working with Melanie, who I will turn over for introductions.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie Schneider. I'm a senior planner in community planning in the South District, specifically on the West team. Julie, I can share my screen for the presentation.
I can do it. Let me jump. I think that might be easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can everyone see it?
Yes, but if you could make it full screen, we're just seeing there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Excellent. So good afternoon, everybody. As we know, we're talking about 2400 to 2440 Dundas Street West. The property is located north of Bloor Street West. You can see on this screen here, and is directly adjacent to the rail corridor. The property is also directly north of the Crossways building, which is right at that Bloor and Dundas Street West intersection. And then there's also a building that's just finishing construction that's in between the Crossways building and the subject site. What we have highlighted on the screen here as well, in this little yellow rectangle outlined in red, is a pickup and drop off connection to the Bloor Go Up Express station, behind the site to directly east of the site. This pickup drop-off area has been an expropriated easement in favor of Metrolinx that goes through the subject site we're talking about now, and then the loop terminates on the adjacent lands to the south. That easement is pretty broad. We don't know if it's a full, completely unencumbered easement or if it's just surface easement, but the intent is for vehicular and pedestrian access to the pickup and drop-off area. The property has a frontage of approximately 160 meters that was on the previous slide along Dundas Street West. Thanks, Julie. And then we can go to the next slide. We just have some very quick stats that will have the applicant team go into further depth, but the proposal has an overall gross floor area of approximately 78,000 square meters. The majority of that is devoted to residential GFA, being just under 72,000 square meters. There is an existing FreshCo that is on site. It's located at the south end of the property. And as part of the proposal, the applicant is looking to retain a grocery store use of equal or more size as required that we'll get into later on. The applicants are also proposing a range of retail and employment uses on site. We also have on screen a breakdown of all of the units that are dwelling units that are being proposed, as well as the proposal for vehicular parking within an underground parking structure. And then bike parking ranging or being approximately 1,300 bike parking spaces. Before we go to the next slide, I do also want to highlight that the tower heights for this proposal are 42 stories, being the middle tower, the tallest one, and then 26 stories located at the south end of the property, adjacent to the tower that is just finishing completion. And then the north end of the site, Tower A, being 37 stories. So having a bit of a peak partway through the site. Next slide, please. Julie, next slide. Oh, did we lose her?
She's still there.
Okay, we may have lost her.
Yeah.
Okay, I will pick up on this then. And then we'll go to full screen. So for the policy context, the property on our urban structure map of the OP is located on the Dundas Avenue. You can see on this map, this is slightly outdated, behind the star of the subject lands, the property was previously identified as an employment area. Through the municipal comprehensive review that is just concluding, going to council hopefully this month, the lands were redesignated to mixed use areas in the official plan. As part of the redesignation to mixed use areas, a SASP, a site and area specific policy, was applied to the property. This is number 796, and this has been approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So this is in full force and effect. So as part of redevelopment of the site, the grocery store does have to be replaced of equal or greater size, and then a certain percentage of the core employment area also has to be provided. So either core employment or general employment uses. We do need to have a compatibility study to ensure that those those employment uses are compatible with the surrounding development and the proposed residential uses. And there are also policies that require a proportion of the units to be affordable if this were a condo development. And this is consistent with the inclusionary zoning, which we are also waiting for ministerial approval on. The site is also located within the Bloor-Dundas Avenue study. This study was concluded in 2009 and was approved by City Council. The intent of this avenue study was to guide development in an as-of-right manner. So this did include a very engaged public consultation as part of that, ensuring that redevelopment contributed positively to the public realm. The Avenue study also included several opportunity sites that identified where additional height and density could be accommodated within this corridor. The subject lands were noted as Opportunity Site 7 and were located within the warehouse precinct. And once Julie returns, she'll be able to provide more context on the warehouse character. As part of the Avenue study, there was also urban design guidelines that were implemented to help evaluate development in this area. The Avenue study also included as-of-right zoning for this area. So as you'll see on this map, the lands are not included in the citywide comprehensive bylaw 569 2013, and instead is we have the previous Toronto bylaw 43886 applying to this site. So the lands are zoned MCR, mixed use commercial residential zone in 43886 with a density of approximately 4 FSI. This zone also permits a maximum height of 20 meters as of right. So really previously envisioning a mixed use mid-rise development in this area. I believe that is my last slide.
Melanie,
So
can you hear
hopefully,
me now?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And
All
excellent
right.
timing. Now's your turn.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. Sorry about the connection issue.
Julie,
Okay,
you've
as
got-
Melanie mentioned.
Julie, you've got 2 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be quick. So Melanie talked about the warehouse character. That's something that we're interested in exploring. There's an existing building on the site, which wasn't determined to be heritage, but we're interested in somehow reflecting it so that it integrates with basically kind of the Junction neighborhood to the north. And the study also identified a mid-rise scale, which is no longer really relevant given where we're at with the housing crisis. If you can go to the next slide, the site is highly visible from 3 sides. And so we are interested in having the panel's input on architectural expression, given that the development will never be sort of hidden by other towers. Next slide. The pedestrian access route, I would say, is something, again, that we wanted panel's consideration on to make sure that it's a comfortable environment that's well animated. Currently, along the driveway, there's a lot of back of house uses, loading areas, and bike storage areas, and I think it could be a bit better animated. So the last slide has our questions. Does the proposal integrate well with the local context, balancing the existing low-rise scale with the intention to deliver density at the GO station? Is the public realm delivering transit supportive development and prioritizing pedestrian access to the station? And does it also function well for vehicles? And finally, does the development deliver an ambitious and unique urban design response to the site, which will remain highly visible from 3 sides? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the consultant presentation. If you could please, well, I guess we know, if you could just introduce yourself before starting, Ralph, because we haven't all met you before online, that would be appreciated. And you have 15 minutes for your presentation, and the same thing, I'll give you a verbal signal 1 minute before the 15 minutes is up.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present. My name is Ralph Giannoni. I'm Principal Giannoni Petriconi Associate Architects in Toronto. I'm here with, I believe, at least one of my clients, Anna Sorokin from Fora Developments. A number of my staff who have been working on this project, specifically Michael Rieta, my senior associate, who's been responsible for this project. If I can maybe now quickly share a screen from Michael, can you launch the presentation? Full screen, great. So as Michael's launching the full screen, As you've heard, I think it's been really well kind of described. The site, it's a very interesting site along Dundas. Dundas is running kind of north-south in this direction, and I have to say, if anyone knows it well, going north of Bloor, I'd say whether it's kind of forgotten stretch of Dundas, and it seems that cars, because of a curve as you go north, kind of speed up. So one of our key ambitions here is to kind of create a kind of center for this edge of this neighborhood, which is the Junction Triangle, as it touches upon Dundas Street in this location, clearly leveraging the transit. Mike, is it not launching? It's okay. I mean, let's go to the next slide. Okay, great. You go to the next slide. Anybody? A little glitchy today. Cursor's really busy. Oh, and not. Melanie, do you maybe have our presentation? That might be.
Sorry, I'm just having a little bit of trouble here. Hang on 1 second. Let me try that again.
My apologies, everyone.
Yeah, there's something happening.
Maybe Melanie, can you try? If it's, I apologize. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, one moment. It'll just take me a minute to pull up.
We'll blame the rain yesterday.
All of the tech issues.
Yeah.
Okay, just one moment.
Great. I'll go really fast, Meg. Just like I'm sweating it out now. Okay, so I mean, we can go past the table of contents. We'll just kind of go through it quickly. I know this, you've seen this already. Like mentioned, I have an extensive consultant team. Clearly, there's a small group of us here today, but really excited about working with these groups that you see here. Next slide, please. So our ambitions clearly is to create new housing options. I think that's what's kind of, I'm going to say, leading the charge in this redevelopment. We're really excited about providing a fulsome public park on site, as well as a series of publicly accessible open spaces that create a really rich, I'm going to say, public realm first approach towards this project. As you heard, there is a requirement and obligation to create a pickup and drop off connection on our site. So that is really seminal, I think, to our approach in terms of location as well as phasing of that important link. Of course, we also want to create a great pedestrian connection to have an alternate to one that's already been created to the south. That is a direct connection from Dundas to the drop-off. Of course, looking at, I think Julie mentioned, the character of the neighborhood, what this addition will be, what is it at the pedestrian scale, but also clearly as a kind of skyline that is additional towers to an existing skyline already. And we're really, again, part of this is creating this mixed use at a fulsome level. We are not only obligated, but are embracing the retention of the food store. We heard that loud and clear from the neighborhood, as well from staff has heard that as well. And again, that is seminal to our changes that we have made, and as well as our phasing, but also new retail support spaces, but more so other cultural industry uses that is a fulsome opportunity for employment. And again, of course, doing the right thing and creating enough critical mass and support of a dynamic community at a major transit station. Next slide, please. Set in context, I won't spend too much time on this. Next slide, please. Of course, the site is just north of Bloor. As you can see, Dundas is running kind of north off of Bloor in this location. And then there are 2 overlaid MTSAs. I think our world has changed. We are anticipating increased densities at these stations, and we probably have next to Union Station, one of the most intensive infrastructure in terms of higher order transit, with a GO up Express, the Bloor subway line, and as well buses and streetcars. So everything's kind of converging here at this really wonderful opportunity to create a really great pedestrian experience and a livable development. Next slide, please. I'll just go over this because that's already been spoken about. And of course, there's a lot going on in and around the site that is also leveraging, of course, this incredibly important transit hub. Next slide. And just looking at the context today, it is basically 2 buildings, one pre-modern building that houses at the north end that has a Shoppers Drug Mart. At the south end is the Food Basics that sits directly across the street from the intersection of Chelsea and Dundas. To the south of us is a 27-story condominium tower, which backs its servicing against our site on its north flank. And then, of course, the crossroads in Bloor Street. And then you can see the kind of adjacency literally right at the transit station. Next slide, please. And as I said, it's kind of a strange place, very interesting. I'm going to say built form and kind of a creative character on the west side, but on the east side, it's very kind of, I'm going to say, somewhat suburban with a surface parking lot, though incredibly well supported by the neighborhood. And you see in the bottom image on the right, the new development that is adjacent to us and clearly taking some scale cues from that as well. Next slide. Great, next slide. So this is the previous submission that we made in March of 2023. There was extensive discussions with city staff, as well as the councillor, as well as the neighborhood, which really started looking at 3 towers, basically stepping up towards the south, towards Bloor Street, with a kind of park space that was a triangle and an intersection at Chelsea with a new signalized entrance to kind of access the pickup and drop off. And then we had some pretty important conversations. And if you go to the next slide, there were some significant changes here. So on the left-hand diagram is the previous submission of the current application, shows one of the key, there's 3 key elements actually. One was the food store, that there is a ambition to keep the food store in complete operation, seamless operation, therefore keeping the food store open at the south end and literally the next day opening it within the site the next day. In the previous application, it would not be possible with the new access from Chelsea, and that the food store sat between 2 towers. We kind of shuffled the deck, and now the food store is at the north end. The intersection stays exactly where the signalized intersection is right now, allowing for the food store to stay open. You can kind of just see the dashed red with some surface parking lot. So Tower A and the food store is first phase, and Tower B, B1 and B2 are the second phase with the park. As well, the city had some concerns about the viability and the usability of a sliver triangle park. So they really were looking for a more rectangular format, and we delivered that as well. So all these component parts were really at the heart of embracing the commentary from both the city staff as well as the community. And we're really excited about the resolution here. Next slide. And that's just zooming in, as you can see, the tower at the top left, I guess the north is the left, the food store that sits basically on the second floor, which is also an incredible opportunity that we're really excited about. The entry that comes up into the site and then goes south towards the new pickup and drop off adjacent behind the building adjacent to us, and the park that now fronts Dundas and has a kind of more of a depth and a kind of more rectangular shape. And of course, looking at opportunities for connections through these blocks to create opportunities for pedestrian connections, as well as this vehicular connection. Next slide. So this is the structuring moves, existing condition of the intersection, which we're retaining. Right now, the drop-off actually sits on our site and will be extended to the south, food store on the left, and existing pharmacy within a pre-modern industrial building, which we are trying to retain. We are going to retain the existing facade. Next slide. Vehicular access, really going deep into the site with the vehicular access, using the kind of corridor adjacent to the crash wall to access the services, to allow all the kind of pedestrian expressed spaces that are animated to be facing west towards the square, towards the street, sorry, the park and towards the street. We're even flaring the building back from where the existing facade ends at the south end to kind of create a more amplified public realm along Dundas Street. Next slide. Then looking kind of in a very straightforward way, creating a pedestrian muse, creating a kind of neck piece of an open space that adds to the park experience, adds to that kind of pedestrian opportunity at the southeast corner, and again, the Folsom Park. Next slide. Placing our towers in their, we think, in a kind of more kind of picturesque arrangement, not setting them up in a line. So there's working with the city to kind of create a more kind of, I'm going to say, informal composition of the towers. Tower B1 and B2 are kind of siblings. Tower A has its own personality. Next slide. And of course, looking at the built form of low slung podiums that are in keeping with a scale of an industrial loft scale that we are, again, complementary. We're not trying to create a kind of pure residential language, but very much interested in creating a kind of scale that embraces that industrial character. And then the tower sitting up on top of that. And clearly here showing what we think is an incredibly kind of rich opportunity for pedestrian and vehicular connections. Next slide. The grocery store sits on the second floor with a ground floor atrium, entry vertical circulation space. So allowing the food store to move up, which really for us is a major opportunity to create animation at grade. And then keep going, the next slide. The core employment sitting below B1 and B2 on the second floor as well. So the kind of built form phasing works like this, where the food store exists. The first phase on the left in the center picture gets built. The food store moves onto the second floor. Then the food store gets removed, and then the B1 and B2 in the second phase with the public park gets a full build out. Next slide.
1 minute left, Ralph.
Okay, no, I think I'm near the end. So this is that idea, the low slung podium you'll see in some of the reviews. And of course, looking at a kind of, again, the articulation of height. B2 is 26 stories, which is 1 story lower than the building adjacent to us. Deep in plan, 42 stories. And then at the north end, we call it a flat iron tower at 37. So again, creating a one composition of heights to kind of get dynamic composition. Next slide, quickly. Yikes.
It's okay.
Okay, and then again, all the kind of rich kind of a recipe of uses between core employment, some retail, the food store, and the residential program with amenities on spilling out onto roofs. Next slide.
Take another couple of minutes, Ralph. We're a bit ahead of schedule. I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
great. No, I'll go as fast as I can. So we're looking again. This is the landscape plan. We have a bit more further in, but just generally this idea of a seamless kind of tree planting that will be a kind of canopy that mediates, I think, the harshness of Dundas Street West. There's this real hope to embrace it. And again, Alyssa and Pete are not here, but I will not promise to kind of express their ideas, but they're very interested in creating a kind of memory of an oak savanna on the site. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Underground is kept to a minimum. We are obligated to provide some, again, it's a food basics. So it's I'm going to say the weekly shop kind of place, notwithstanding it's supported on a daily by the neighbors, but that there is some need and some obligation to provide some vehicular parking. We are also putting EV, I think, for all the parking chargers. So really quite excited and keeping the residential to a minimum. Next slide. And just looking at, again, the ground plan, which surely shows trying to just make sure that the public realm is supported by commercial, retail, lobbies, the Galleria, which we think is really an exciting addition at grade, even laminating commercial that we think could be some art spaces as well. So again, creative industries, and of course, retail within the heritage facade along Dundas Street. Next slide. And we go that next slide. Sorry, keep going. I'll just pan over this. And the food store, fulsome, large, 30,000 square foot food store, as well as the core employment on the second floor on the B1 and B2 towers. We can go pretty quick. Amenity space, just go through these slides. Looking at the towers, again, amenity space at the podium, spilling out onto green roofs. The towers, as I said, 37. They're very, I'm going to say, somewhat sculpted. There's an intention, really want to embrace the dynamic quality of the buildings, and there's an idea about that architectonically. Next slide.
You actually have another 40 slides, Ralph. Do you want to?
Yeah, no, I'm going to stop at the renderings and then.
Okay.
Right. Landscape. This is some images of what Studio North would like to implement. Next slide. And some of their coloration that they're trying to imbue within their landscape. Next slide. And we just go through this because I've already spoken about this. My gosh, there's a lot here. Street sections. There's a narrow spot where the existing facade is, which we're retaining, but we step back 5 meters as soon as we're past that on the south side. You can kind of see that in the image. Next slide. And we can go right through this. And we can go right through this. Talked about it, talked about that. Bikes, a lot of bike storage, 1,373, I believe. Next slide. And the phasing. We can just go right to the architectonic and that'll be it. So try to embrace the architectural expression of motion and nature. So there's this kind of transforming landscape idea of rustling feathers and a kind of stoicness of a tree, that kind of also almost embracing that kind of strong oak savanna. Next slide. And of course, the expression of that becomes quite exciting with color as well as a kind of warm palette. Next slide. And then this is just those views that you've seen before, really looking at that podium level, trying to kind of embrace that industrial scale and language and materiality that we think actually is part of, I think, the character of this side of the street. And then looking at these 2 green towers that have kind of rustling leaves for balcony edges and the kind of stoic tree-like verticality of the tower, which is a flat iron, to the north with an amenity space kind of cut into it that we think will be a wonderful opportunity for the amenity to overlook and even look through to High Park to the west of us. Next slide. I think we're almost there. And again, that scale and that personality. Next slide. And then just looking kind of towards the southeast, toward that pedestrian connection to the drop-off, looking at that scale, what we think is the kind of 4-story like scale of the industrial loft buildings that exist to the north, but also embracing an idea of terracotta, glazed terracotta, and both color as well as red, and then the foreground being the park, and then this Galleria space that connects to the food store on the second floor. And then looking at an improved public realm along the entire apron of our frontage along Dundas Street. And I think I can stop there. There's any question about sustainability? We have quite excited about our sustainability strategy, which is just a nascent one, but will be embraced here as well. Next, that's it. That's it for now.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Thank you, Meg, for letting me.
Yeah, no, of course. So we're going to move into questions of clarification. So panel members, if you could please raise your hands. We have about 14 minutes for that. Then I will do it when I first see a hand, or Heather.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A couple of questions. So my first question, Ralph, was about, I think, according to my count, the 28th and 29th floor of the northernmost tower that you said was amenity. Is that amenity for the building? Like it's gyms and party rooms, or yes? Okay, so not for,
Yes.
it's not like a public restaurant or anything. Yeah, okay,
No.
thank you. And the structuring moves slide, which I really appreciated on page 20. I'm just wondering, some of the dimensions, the separation distances on the south property line, that building that I guess city presented is just finishing up. It looks like there are primary windows and balconies facing north on up to, it looks like an 8-story piece. I guess it steps from 2 to 6 to 8, something like that. I'm just wondering, and then suites start in this proposed development at level 4, I believe. I'm just wondering what the separation distance is. You've got primary windows and balconies and everything facing south there as well. You're set back 3 meters from the property line. And
Right.
then I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what the dimension might be there, building face to that adjacent property. I don't know if someone can look that up. I'm not sure if you have it there.
Our tower is 6 meters to the property line.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
not the tower, it's the
Heather's
podium.
asking about the podium.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And
But
I
you could,
don't think we have that, but I can get that.
it's okay. You can
my-
just say it later. That's totally fine. And then my last question, easy one, is just the commercial noted on level 2. Is that an office or is it not determined at this point? Just wondering what you mean by commercial. I think it's blue
well,
on.
yeah, so
yeah.
that is core. That is an obligation of the SASP as well as a kind of very
No.
interesting. It's core employment space, so it needs to be
Okay.
by definition core employment. We're hoping, and I think there is a kind of ambition, I think both on our clients' part as well as the cities to embrace creative industries.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
And to answer your question, there are no units in the podium. It basically is, it's tall but it has
Oh,
a
I see.
commercial
So
space. And then
that's right,
above the
because your
commercial
podium's
space, yeah, it's quite low. I mean, low in terms of
right.
stories, but it's
Yes.
only that commercial, that core employment that is 3 meters away from the lot line. There's no residential
Got it.
that is facing.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Paul.
Thank you.
You're on. Yeah.
Yep. A couple very quick questions. I'll just go through them quickly. I'm just curious about the tenure of the residential. Curious just if you could talk a little bit about how the pickup and drop off works and how much of that you're just sort of inheriting from Metro links, or what conditions or the easements maybe are related with it. And then the back crash wall, I saw it's noted, I think it's 2.1 meters. Do you have any sort of design ideas for that? Specifically, I'm curious, would there be something taller, because the existing one looks way taller? And then would there be any landscaping, murals, wayfinding, things of that nature? So tenure, pickup, drop off, and crash wall.
Sure. So we're not there with tenure yet. I mean, it's a very interesting time. I'm going to say there is a ambition to go as quick as possible to build the north building, but the client has not determined whether they're looking into a rental program potentially, and there are kind of, I think, elements within the SASP as well that speak to that. So, but right now they don't really have a clear direction. The sands are shifting underfoot as we speak, but with regards to tenure, with regards to pickup and drop off, I mean, we are just obligated to create a surface access to that drop off. The drop off is now part of an adjacent site that was designed. It's just moved south. That connects to an east-west pedestrian connection on the south side of the adjacent site to us. And therefore, we're really just talking about the vehicles that would drive. And so we're sharing that drop-off drive that would be with our servicing. And again, our servicing is all kind of either underneath the podium right up against the crash wall or on the rear of that lane on the south side. With regards to the crash wall, very good point. I'm sure that there probably is a design for that. I think that was one of the elements that we talked about with North Studio, as well as the city. So that crash wall is something that has to be looked at aesthetically. And I think the 2.1 is, as far as we understand what we need, what we require for our consultant, specifically to, I think, the sensitive uses and the dimensions that we have away from things. So, but we can check that. Hope that
Thank
answered
you.
those questions.
Jessica.
Just a quick question about the drive access to the private road east-west off of Dundas. I can't find a dimension, but I'm just wondering, is there are you anticipating 2 lanes of traffic with lay-by parking, or just sort of can you explain how that functions given its width?
This is the drive that comes off of Dundas Street, or
Correct, yes.
the private road that comes
Private
off
road,
Dundas
yeah.
Street. I mean, Mike,
I
if
can
you
help
could just-
answer that if you, I mean, it's a minimum of 6 meters, but we've got a little bit more, so we're at about 8 meters right now. And that allows us to have a little bit of a lay-by for those entries along that side. So you can see there's B1 and B2 have 2 residential entries. There's the opportunity to have a lay-by kind of drop off there with 6 meters clear beyond that.
Thank you.
Heather, your hand is up, but did you have a follow-up question? No. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I have one, and I'm sorry if you've answered it already. I'm busy taking notes, and sometimes I miss things. The Chelsea Road alignment there, can you talk about why that was not, why why that was problematic for the community?
I could try. I mean, I'm still picking the tar and the feather off me with that proposition. There was vehement opposition to it for a number of reasons. And again, I think this is people that really understand it, or the people that live it. It is from Chelsea South, a bit of a gong show, I'm going to say, of TTC access points, the development to the south of us with its access point that's not even aligned. So the main issue was the confusion that exists, and that the existing condition for the neighborhood works, and that anything moving it south would just create more havoc. And I think this was supported by our traffic consultant. We did originally align it thinking it was the right thing to do, but when you think that it's really only local traffic that we hope would not be using a car and would be walking through the neighborhood to get to it. So what's interesting is it just works best to try to move the road north and create the intersection kind of mid-block. It also allowed, of course, for the food store and the drop-off to be continuously in operation as we phase out. So kind of one of those happy compromises, I'm going to say, of an adjustment. But it was all the kind of extraneous pressures, I think. I don't think it was as much about, I don't want a road that's going to penetrate the neighborhood, as much as it was the reality of a little bit of messiness, quite a bit of messiness that exists on the south side.
But the route to okay, thank you. That's helpful. The getting to the drop off and pickup now is maybe 50% longer of a route. Roughly, it's longer. Whatever the percentage is, it's a longer trip to get to the drop off and pickup now through the development.
It's the existing one, basically.
Yeah.
It's as it exists.
Yeah, no, I'm comparing it. Sorry, I'm comparing it only to the previous submission.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the city wasn't keen on the Triangle Park. That was the way that was just, that might be a question for the city. Like, you know, the rectangular park is preferred because you can program it better. Is that am I putting words in somebody's mouth?
Meg,
Well,
I can answer that question if
Yeah.
that's okay. So the original proposal was a POPs, not
Yeah.
a full parkland dedication because of the configuration being triangular. And then there was also underground parking proposed. So our park staff were not supportive of that. With the difficulty in programming, like you said, it could not be dedicated as parkland. The other element is the SASP really encourages it to be parkland dedication. And if for whatever reason that could not have been accommodated, then we would look at a POPs.
Okay.
And may I, Melanie, also, we are also retaining the existing facade. So again, that was another element that
Right.
just caused some challenge with peeling off of the. But what we did is we kept the, you know, we've widened now as soon as you come south of the facade of that retained facade, and it widened. So there was a lot of effort to still maintain this idea of being able to slide, you know, and slide through and slide diagonally through the site.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions before we move into? No? Okay. So a quick recap. This is a rezoning application for 2400 to 2440 Dundas Street West. It's just north of Dundas and Bloor on the east side and directly adjacent to the CNCP go line, tracks rather. It's a mix of residential, grocery, and core employment uses with a total GFA of just shy of 80,000 meters squared, with just over 1,200 units proposed. 30% of which are 2 and 3 bedroom units. Of that 30%, 10% are 3 bedroom units. We're going to move into panel discussion. We have 40 minutes for that, and we do have a smaller panel today. So there'll be 5 of us speaking to the project. That doesn't mean you should each have 8 minutes, or that you should each need to feel the need to fill 8 minutes. So please govern yourselves accordingly. We'll go in the order: Jim Goff, Jessica, Olivia, Paul, and then Heather. So Jim, if you could lead us off, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have too many comments. I'm sure I won't take 8 minutes. To focus on the questions, I think the second one is the most pertinent to transportation, obviously. So I would say the proposal does a good job of delivering on pedestrian access improvement as well as vehicular access to the site. It is a tight balance between access to the development and to the GO station. It's a fairly narrow site, but I think that is handled well by the concept we've seen today. I also do think the development fits in well with the existing older post-industrial buildings to the north, and it's certainly going to be a positive addition to this section of Dundas Street, increasing the urbanization of the street. And as Ralph noted, traffic in this area really does start to speed up north of Bloor. So I think the increasing urbanization from this development and the others that are happening should mitigate that to some small degree. But, I think in the long run, when Dundas is reconstructed, I think there is a good rationale and a good opportunity for the city to review the cross-section and the design of Dundas, given the large amount of pedestrians that are already crossing and walking along the street, and that's obviously just going to grow. So there's an opportunity there in the future to really improve the streetscape. But of course, the second entrance to Dundas West Station, which is in progress now, is also going to help to accommodate the pedestrian demands on the east side. So that's another positive. Finally, a quick comment on the design of the private driveway, as was raised in the presentation. I think given the proliferation of delivery vehicles by multiple modes that we're seeing these days, providing a small amount of lay-by space would likely be very logical in terms of accommodating that function. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica.
Apologies for having to turn off my video. My connection is not the best today, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Really interesting site in a unique neighborhood. Firstly, I'd like to appreciate the revised location of the public park dedication to a more central position with sort of, appropriate setbacks to building frontages. It makes a lot of sense with that pedestrian connection, the sort of muse through the building. It also has a lot more usable space given its shape now, so it allows it to sort of feel more knit in than the triangle park in the previous submission, which kind of had a bit of a feeling of leftoverness, if that's a word, which it isn't. I also appreciate the shifting and reshaping of the southernmost tower and how these three towers are working together. I appreciate this sort of idea of the tree and the leaves and how that kind of works together with the landscape proposal at grade. Just starting from the north and progressing south along Dundas, the transition from the existing neighborhood, I think, works well. Keeping that heritage facade helps pull that character into this frontage. And then sort of the setting back of the podium at the gallery area there is a nice move before then this sort of generous opening up into the park. So it has this sort of very natural progression of public realm. I think the landscaped open space between the parkland and the pedestrian muse, to me, I'm a little unclear on how it works, what happens there, but it's very early in the process. I think it would probably be useful for the design team to sort of know what's desired in the public park or what might go into the public park when they're thinking about that space, so that they can really be designed to support and enhance what's happening in the park, as well as supporting the movement of people sort of through the muse. So, I think it could be a really exciting space. And for that pedestrian muse, as it's developed, really thinking about what will make people comfortable in the space, things like height, lighting, adjacent active uses, those all need to be considered to make it feel safe during all hours of operation. And then I brought up the private road in the question period because it sort of felt very wide to me. So I'd encourage you to look at ways of sort of calming or slowing the vehicles down, ways in which you could maybe shelter your lay-by parking, because I agree with Jim, there's a necessity for it, especially with a grocery store, and not everyone has their own vehicle to take their groceries home. But maybe you could use vegetated bump outs that also sort of serve as stormwater collection or treatment areas. So looking at sort of eating away at that hard paved surface while still providing the functionality. And then you've shown continuous paving throughout that roadway, which I encourage you to keep. It just helps enhance that public and sort of pedestrian nature of the space. Generally, I really like how the project is relating to the local context, sort of in the early sort of materiality and color palettes that you're showing. And I look forward to seeing it again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Olivia.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think there's a lot that I really appreciate in the design. The built form, I think, is really interesting and dynamic, and I think you've sort of mitigated some of those tight tower separations through the sculpting of the towers, and I find that convincing. I think the new park layout is really generous, and I think it'll create a really nice street frontage along Dundas. From a sustainability standpoint, I also really appreciate the minimalist approach you've taken to parking. The less we build below grade, the lower our embodied carbon is, and I think that's really appropriate given the richness of the transit in this neighborhood. I do feel a bit of a trade-off in that the private road feels like there's a lot of servicing there, and I think just from a pedestrian standpoint, feeling safe walking alone at night, I would like to see more activation happening along this road. From a sustainability standpoint, again, on slide 52, you've listed some of your energy and GHG performance targets. So it looks like you're just targeting the minimum for Toronto Green Standard. I would just note that we're less than a year away from the TGS and its new update. And so we're less than a year away from these targets becoming obsolete. And I would really encourage you to push farther, given that this is such a prominent site. Your site is not too small to consider district energy. I think there's a unique opportunity with the supermarket, which is going to generate a lot of waste heat, and can we reuse that heat to start to service the residential blocks? We're really seeing developers appreciate high sustainability performance as a marketing strategy, and I think people would really love to see that. And then finally, appreciate the requirement for affordable housing and sort of gearing the residential component to families. And I would ask you to consider how to push this farther, where are the spaces for children, where are the spaces for seniors. I'm particularly looking at the landscape precedents on slide 33. I think there's a lot of beautiful concepts here, and I love the idea of the Savannah Oak. I think a bit more thought into what people are doing here, and I think that sort of echoes Jessica's comments about what do people in the neighborhood want. It's still early, but I think often we get too far and we miss this chance, thinking about the public park as well as the rooftop amenity spaces as this sort of semi-private zone that also has opportunities. And those are all of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Ralph and team, for the presentation. I'll echo what others have said. I think overall the composition is great. The integration into the neighborhood balances sort of that desire to respect some of the heritage elements, but also increase density and kind of make best use of the infrastructure investments here. I'm also sort of excited by the adventurousness of some of the landscape design as well as the architecture of the tower. So we look forward to sort of the resolution of that. Curious to see how it lands, understanding, there's probably a couple versions of this that we'll see in the future. Most of my comments really are on kind of the nitpicky details and sort of came out of some of my questions already. In no particular order, I think the crash wall is going to be really critical as a design element. It's going to be a kind of prominent backdrop on your main drive from the signalized intersection, but also to the pedestrian muse. And so I think integrating it in a way that sort of signals the sort of wayfinding that, the station is over here, is going to be a critical part of that, and whether that's done through some kind of landscape treatment, vines, or super graphics, murals, something that accepts that it's likely going to get tagged and works with that, lighting or other elements, I think is going to be critical to the success. The other spot I'd maybe sort of highlight is the pedestrian muse in between and how we wrap the edges of that and the kind of programming to make that successful. I think the current plan that shows the sort of residential lobby kind of extending in a thin corridor with the sort of bike rooms wrapping may not be the best way to do that just now. Those are not necessary. You're essentially creating a parallel pedestrian muse that I understand the desire for weather protection, but as far as active programming, it may not be there. And then you're also kind of orienting it a little bit to the wall rather than rotating it maybe 15 degrees clockwise. So it kind of guides you more directly towards the destination of the station. So I think working through that, maybe flipping some of the bike storage to the opposite side or consolidating some of that bike storage, thinking of it as an actual destination in and of itself, pairing it with some bike repair or other facilities that can be a bit of a communal space that doesn't rely on retail or other uses, could be sort of a bridge between the back of house laneway and the kind of front of house POPs courtyard. I think there's a few different strategies you could test there. And then lastly, I'm just looking at the pedestrian mapping diagram. I think it's your slide 39. And I think there's just a little bit of work needed to kind of to finish the pedestrian connections as you get past the Mews, through that laneway, past the loading docks, and then you got to kind of hop across the oncoming traffic to then get to a very narrow sidewalk. And I understand there's probably a different team doing the actual pickup and drop off design, but I think negotiating that to make sure you've got a safe, convenient path for those pedestrians, wide sidewalk, figuring out where the crosswalk is and getting that sort of stitched together is just going to sort of be the sort of final piece that makes this work. So I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'll just admit that I was originally kind of flummoxed about the original site plan and where the team ended up. But after, hearing from both the city and I guess some of the panel members who live in the area, I've gained an appreciation of some of the, I guess, chaotic traffic patterns. And so appreciate the change and appreciate, Ralph, that you and your team are excited about the revisions. So that's great. I also have a deep appreciation for the sort of scale and thoughtfulness of this development, especially the two-story, I think Ralph was saying low slung podium. I do think it relates well to the existing context, and it's also just a rare thing to see a two-story podium, and I think it fits very well in this this area of Dundas. I also really like the imagery that was shown with respect to the architectural idea. So the seasonality, the kind of deep colors of lichen and fungus and tree bark. So with respect to color and also with respect to texture, so appreciate the kind of expressive balcony shapes, and like many beautiful textures, these often rely on a high degree of repetition, which I appreciate. That gives a kind of overall impression of simplicity on the towers. I was initially wondering what was special about that kind of saw cut that occurs in the northernmost tower, and just one person's opinion, but rather than it be a kind of saw cut in the kind of tree that you're putting forward as a kind of design inspiration, I'm just wondering whether it could be something that pushes out a little bit more expressive, a little bit more like a kind of fungus rather than an inset. Wondering if that would mesh better with your design ideas. Again, just a quick subjective opinion. Like Paul, I had the same observation about something needs to happen. I think where you're currently just showing a kind of thin green, but where there, I guess, might be a crash wall. So I have in my notes here, yeah, something besides signage that says "Go pick up location in this direction." I think there is a huge opportunity here. Something maybe a bit more a wall, or that has a kind of lenticular aspect to it. Something that changes as you go by. I don't have any issues with the height and density proposed here. It would have been nice to have a little bit more information on the kind of photos and what's going on with the drop off by both the city and I think the presenters group, just so we could really appreciate the kind of interface there all along the eastern property line. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I will just take a second to gather all the comments together. Thanks so much to the city presenters and to the proponent for bringing the project to the design review panel. I'm sitting about a 6-minute walk from it right now. I know the site really well. it is a tricky site, and it is a very important site, given its context, or given its location rather. Julie at the outset said, mid-rise designation here is not relevant given the housing crisis. I mean, I think that's something we all have to give some thought to, in the context of, because right across the street we have a very low slung neighborhood, single family residential neighborhood. At the same time, this is a site that's at I think, I can't remember who said it, like Union Station is a very transit dense location. And it's an important one to develop properly and accessibly for the future. Given that, the panel is at a high level, and I think unanimously appreciative of, or I can say not, I think they are unanimously appreciative of the proposal that was presented today. On the subject of the public realm, the concept of the low slung podium, well received and appreciated here, and I think it goes a long way to aligning the proposal with the neighborhood that's to the west of it, across Dundas Street West. I will add that I think it was even more successful in the first proposal, in the first design. I think it really shone there, and because of some of the revisions that have had to be made to the proposal, it's a little bit less here. So if anything, I would encourage the proponent, if at all possible, to reinstate some of the more of the prominence that I think it had in the first proposal. Although I would agree with Heather, we were a little short on materials here to be fully able to understand that. I kept zooming in and wanting to see more. General consensus that the revised park configuration was more successful, less vestigial feeling. So great appreciation for that. A comment from the panel to design the pedestrian muse in concert with the park to enhance connectivity. And the suggestion to consider relocation of the bike parking to enhance the muse, but there could be other elements of this as well. And this is all under the heading of public realm. I'll talk more about pedestrian and vehicle access in the muse in the next section. Another comment under public realm, a sense that the access and intuitive wayfinding to the GO and the Up Express was more, and this is me speaking here, was much cleaner and stronger and efficient in the first design. But acknowledging that there are changes that have to be made, that it would be good to have more identification of the route back to there, whether it's on the crash wall, how that's done, but at least that it's prominently identified as a way, because currently it feels really very much like a back alley, and that's not what you're planning at all, or like a back entrance, like a back door to it, but certainly something that needs development as you move forward. On pedestrian and vehicular access, a sense that the proposal handles this well, and from Jim, that this project will contribute to the future opportunity that of improving the streetscape in this neighborhood in its entirety. And this project, with its wider sidewalks and the way that it's set back from the road, will certainly contribute to an improved streetscape in this area. Some considerations for you to add some sheltered lay-by space. Consider some traffic calming devices that reduce the amount of hard paving in this area, and to add some more activation and safety enhancement along the private roadway. With respect to architecture and context, architectural expression and context, the composition was well received. A sense that generally it fits in quite well with the neighborhood, and that the transition from the neighborhood fabric is successful both morphologically and materially. And then a final note on sustainability, to please consider a district energy system as you move forward with this. As we are always, it's early in the project, of course, but it's not too early to always make to remark on sustainability targets and aspirations. So with that, we're going to move into a vote on this project. So if you could please, Leanne, introduce the vote. Thank you.
The vote is intended to provide emphasis and clarity to the discussion and an indication of how well the project advances the panel's mandate of promoting design excellence. Support means that the project meets the relevant design excellence objectives. The panel advises that the project should continue in the proposed direction and include refinements that were recommended during the review. This option can be made with key conditions if so desired by the panel. Non-support means that the project does not meet fundamental design excellence objectives. The panel advises that the project should be substantially redesigned to address the issues identified during the discussion.
Thank you, Leanne. So before we proceed into the vote, I'm going to ask panel members if there's any panel member interested in proposing a conditional support, a condition to a support vote. I'm seeing no hands. Okay. Let's move into the vote. As I call your name, please let me know your vote. Jim Goff.
Support.
Jessica.
Support.
Olivia.
Support.
Paul.
Support.
Heather.
Support.
Thank you very much. And again, so recorded. Thank you to the panel to the proponents and the city again, and to the panel members for your review. We look forward to seeing the project as it develops at a later stage. Ralph, I should have given you more time to speak. We are now on break, and I'm not going to suggest that we start early on the next project because the proponents for that won't. That would be unfair to ask to try to get them to come earlier on short notice. So we are going to break now, and we are going to resume at 3 p.m.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comments.
Hello, everyone. If you're there, if you could please turn on your video so we know you're present. Right. Just waiting for 4 more people to join us. Olivia, you're there. Heather is there. Jim Melvin. Okay. Just waiting for Jessica to, oh no, Jessica is here. Okay, I see you. Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to the second agenda and final agenda item for today. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. The second item on our agenda today is 110 Adelaide Street East. Sorry, this is the second review of the project. My name is Meg Graham and I will be chairing this, this session. Again, welcome and thank you for participating. This application is a rezoning and site plan application, as well as the second review of 110 Adelaide Street East. We have an hour and 20 minutes scheduled for the review. It is a formal review session and there will be a vote taken at the end. Staff have 10 minutes for their presentation. This will be followed by a 15-minute presentation by the applicant with discussion to follow. The session is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. The recording will be available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. I will now conduct the roll call. Panel members, please confirm that you are participating in the review when your name is called and whether you have a conflict of interest with the project. Jim Goff.
Present and no conflict.
Thank you. Jessica Hutchin.
Present, no conflict.
Thank you. Olivia Kyung.
Here, no conflict.
Heather Rolston.
Here and no conflict.
Jim Melvin. I thought I saw, there you are. Jim? You're muted. I need to, could you?
Present, no conflict.
Fantastic. Have I missed anybody? No, I think we're all set. Okay. Some reminders before we get started. For panel members, please don't forget the staff questions, which will be at the end of their presentation, of the staff presentation, and to provide commentary on both issues of concern and appreciation. To those who are making a presentation, when you have 1 minute to go in your allotted time, I will give you a verbal signals so that you know to wrap up the presentation. Okay, so with all that taken care of, we can now begin with the staff presentation, please. And please don't forget to introduce yourselves before you start speaking. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, double muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juliana Azem. I'm the senior urban designer working on this file. I'll be presenting today along with my colleague, Christy. Do you want to introduce yourself, Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy Chow, the community planner on this file.
Thank you.
Okay. You can see the presentation page and not the notes.
We can see the notes as well.
Okay. Did this before and it worked.
That's it.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we're here today to present 110 and 112 Adelaide Street East and 85 Lombard Street. This proposal was presented to the DRP in 2021, was a different proposal, was also mixed use with office component. The height was 35 stories and the FSI was 14.3. Some of the comments from the panel to the former applicants were regarding the architectural expression, the setbacks regarding in relation to adjacent buildings, and for them to take into consideration the heritage context. On the screens today, the project that the panel will be looking at, the proposed height is 65 stories or 209 meters. It's also a mixed-use development with residential, office, and retail. And the FSI now is 28.4. Some images of the proposed development. The site is located just north of the St. James Park and between the King Parliament secondary plan area, the financial district, and the St. Lawrence neighborhood. Although it's not in part of the neighborhood, it's also part of the St. Lawrence neighborhood business improvement area. It's very important to note that the site is just outside the St. Lawrence HCD, and it's very close to the regional 10 blocks of the city in Toronto, highlighted in orange. Although there's no heritage property on site, there's a lot of heritage properties in the area and in close proximity of the site. Just looking at the subject property, the site fronts both Adelaide Street East and Lombard Street. The Adelaide frontage is wider with 31 meters and Lombard is narrow with almost 60 meters. The site depth also varies between 55 and 27 meters. Currently on site, there's a 4-story office building and a parking lot. And I'll pass it on to Christy.
Hi, everyone. I'll keep this policy section very brief. So under the official plan, the site is located in the downtown and central waterfront area, which is one of the areas identified to best accommodate population and employment growth in the city. The site is designated mixed-use areas which permit and encourage a variety of uses. Under the downtown secondary plan, the site is designated mixed-use areas 2 intermediate, which is generally intended to form a transition between the taller buildings in mixed-use areas 1 to the west and the mid-rise scale of mixed-use areas 3, which is kind of to the east. Also noting that the site fronts onto Adelaide Street, which is a priority cycling route. The site is zoned commercial residential, so basically a mix of uses is permitted. We also have the city's tall building design guidelines that provide guidance on the design of tall buildings and to help implement official plan policy and ensure that tall buildings fit within their context and minimize local impacts. Guidelines of note relate to the height and scale of the podium, as well as tower setbacks and separation distances. And we also have a variety of other design guidelines for guidance on designing tall buildings for children and families, as well as pets, complete streets, and retail.
Here's a bird's eye view of the site. You can see along Adelaide, there's a lower scale context, and it is mid to tall along Lombard Street. And the image, you also see how the height of the building is lowers towards the west. Sorry, towards the east. Some images showing on the left the low-rise context from Adelaide and a bit of like a taller context along Lombard. The site is just north of St. James Park. You can see that the existing context Adelaide is not uniform in height, but it's all low in scale. There is an existing mid-block connection to the east. These images show the existing condition of the public realm on site. As you can see, it's quite narrow on both Adelaide and Lombard. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the proposal, but I would like to highlight a couple of things. The proposed podium along Lombard is 42 meters tall, and along Adelaide it's between 15 and 29 meters. There's a small step back being proposed, but the overall podium height reads as almost 30 meters. The proposed podium heights are taller than existing office building and create a significant change in existing context. The proposed tower setbacks varies between 5.5 meter and 0 to the east. To the west, it varies between 4.45 and 0, but there's a series of different setbacks due to tower articulation. The proposed tower setbacks to 77 Lombard Street are quite minimal. And although the applicant has secured LDA with some properties, not all reduced setbacks are covered by LDAs. Sorry. On the ground floor plan, you can see the residential and retail are facing Adelaide Street, and office access is off Lombard, as well access to loading and servicing. The proposed setback from the curb that is clear of any building elements, it's 3.7 meters on both Adelaide and Lombard streets. Existing and planned context relevant for this development, you can see on the left, 47 stories is the tallest building approved and under construction in the immediate area. There is a proposed development application proposing 59 stories just north of the site. It's highlighted in black. This application is currently under appeal. They propose a 59-story building and with a very generous public realm, including a heritage retention and a mid-block connection. And the FSI of this proposal is 19.2. I'm going to talk now about the issues that I'd like the panel to focus on today. So please comment on the relationship between the proposed massing, podium and tower with the neighboring properties in terms of scale, height, and setbacks. Please comment on the public realm along both frontages, Adelaide and Lombard streets, in terms of boulevard setback, pedestrian scale podium, ground floor uses, and streetscape tree planting. Please comment on the relationship between the proposed building and the St. James Park. Please comment on the exterior expression of the podium and the tower and how they relate to the neighborhood and the adjacent St. Lawrence HCD. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. We'll move to the consultant presentation. And again, please introduce yourselves before you begin. You'll have 15 minutes. And as I mentioned earlier, I will let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. First off, my name's Henry Burston. I'm a principal at Arcadis Architects. I'm joined by Saul Wassermuhl, who many of you at the panel should be very familiar with, and Michael Peruzzi as the landscape architect on the file. I'd like to thank the panel and the city for accommodating a quick entry to the DRP. Although you've seen this for the second time for us and this team, it's an early in the design process, and you know, it's good timing to get some engagement, and we look forward to your feedback on the design. Our site is located at 110 Adelaide East between Church and Jarvis. and the site is located within 800 meters, walking distance to 4 existing and planned subway stops, as well as 3 TTC streetcar routes. It falls within a mixed-use area and also falls within 2 what's this? 2 subway areas, major subway areas, PMSTAs. The context or the site plan, which you can see in yellow, has a frontage of 31.5 meters on Adelaide and 15.9 meter frontage on Lombard. It's directly across St. James Cathedral and St. James Park, and it is currently a 4-story unassuming office building surrounded by condominiums, low-scale commercial and residential properties, and it even has a at-grade parking lot on site. As noted by the planner, Adelaide is a collection of different heights ranging from 3 stories to the east. There's a pop-up going up to 8 stories and then 5 stories as it continues along the street. On the north portion of our property, immediately adjacent to us, we have a 12-story on Lombard and a 14-story. That rises up to 15-story on the east and then drops down to 6-story on the west. Immediately across from us, there's a 10 and 11-story on Lombard, and we also anticipate the 59-story building that was noted by our planner. And then you can see that relationship on page 44 of the book. The most significant heritage building in close proximity is St. James Cathedral, with its aesthetic of straight, strong verticals and buttresses. It has view corridor restrictions that we are complying with, and you'll see that on page 39 and 41 of your book. Here you can see some shots of the existing. We're proposing a 65-story mixed-use residential office and commercial building of 600 units with an 8 to 10-story podium with 330 square meters of office and 400 square meters of retail. The podium at the north of 10 stories is meant to relate to the 2 buildings that I had referenced at 95 and 77 Lombard of 12 and 14 stories. And the podium on Adelaide has points.
Henry, sorry, you're cutting out. I hate to ask, but can you maybe turn off your video and see if that helps?
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry,
Can
you were cutting
you hear
out
me?
there. So no, you were cutting out. So try turning off your video and see if that helps.
Okay, I will do that. Is that better?
So far, yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so our client purchased the site, and we made a decision to retain the proposed setbacks from the original tower footprint for the west, north, and the majority of the east, with the exception of an additional bump out of 5.5 meters on that east side. This was in order to respect the ongoing engagement with the community that had happened on the previous application. By adding the 5.5 meters, what the client has actually done is secured air rights on both the east and the west property lines to a distance covering 12.5 meters separations from the tower. The air rights will also allow for an additional 1 story to be built on the adjacent low-rise buildings. And what we have on the south are 2 setbacks, one at 1.5 from the 2-story to the 6-story, and another setback, basically resulting in a 3-meter setback from the south property line to the tower. And that will result in a very compact floor plate of 585 square meters. The securing of the air rights will also allow there to be windows on the side walls along the property lines, the east and the west property lines within the podium. And we've also allowed for a cutout which you can see north of the tower on the east side, so that we can have single loaded units facing east. And we've basically set that so that we're not disturbing any of the existing built windows on the east side of that building. The majority of the units are going to be facing east and west to maintain privacy between the proposed and the existing. So these steps that you see happening within the tower, those are all going to be more spandrel or treated as solid facade, and will not have direct facing windows with any of the existing buildings. The wind conditions, as you can see on page 31 through 37, demonstrate no adverse impacts to the existing conditions. They're all positive and will require no further mitigation. We're also not impacting the park with any shadows on either Moss Park or St. James Park. Here you can see the ground floor, which it features new and existing street trees. We've set back in order to accommodate a 2.1 meter sidewalk. And the idea is to really create a highly animated and engaging facade with a residential lobby and retail, which is has the ability to be 2 stories, which effectively works into the mezzanine. And at the north end, you can see our loading, which is all enclosed. And we have an additional loading space for type C, as recommended by our traffic consultant. At the north end, we've got an elevator that accesses the office and also doubles up as a individual access for any of the bike lockers that are going to be provided on site. There are 670 bikes being proposed. As you move up the building, you have indoor amenity space, which is identified in pink. And on the 3rd floor, there's a relationship between that and the outdoor amenity space. There's an office on the 2nd floor. And then we continue to move up with single loaded corridor on the north. And then the tower starts to express itself with its 585 square meter plate. Here you can see a rendering of Adelaide from a pedestrian view. The concept is really to create an engaging frontage along Adelaide with the residential lobby, the retail entrance, and areas for signage, canopies, weather protection to mark the entrances. The mezzanine is an extension, and you can see that retail overlooking the canopy, and that's going to provide a lot of eyes on the street and more visibility through the daytime. The verticality of the piers and the architectural cant through that you see between the 2nd floor and above is really meant to be reminiscent of both the adjacent low-rise mansards and the rhythm and scale of the buttresses that you see on St. James Cathedral. So we really feel that these openings are going to provide positive activity and engagement. You can also see the upper level is going to have fitness areas overlooking the park. Here you can see the full extent of that podium, which steps back at the 6th story. We've had a number of discussions with the city, whose opinion was that the scale along Adelaide is more representative of the low rise than this mid-rise that we've picked up on as well. So that is fairly new information for us. You know, we received that maybe late last week, and we are seriously considering the city's feedback to potentially reduce the podium height. And that would, effectively allow that reveal floor to move down to this level, and then we carry the aesthetic of the tower above. And that's something that, we would like to hear a little bit more feedback from the panel on, and you've also been engaged by the planners for that particular issue. The vertical expression that you see in that podium leads the eyes up to the dramatic tower expression, with the 2-story reveal being the break between the 8th-story and the start of the balconies. The tower will be a combination of highly insulated metal panel, spandrel, and the perforated metal balconies. The tower design really uses the balconies to create a sculptural form around the facades, with the silver balconies providing a contrast to the dark tinted glazing of the tower to create a dynamic, kinetic, and organic wrap for the tower. Here you can see the tower in its emerging context with the 59-story across the street. And here you can see a shot along Lombard Street, which we're also proposing a similar aesthetic to the podium that we just showed you on Adelaide. And you can see how it fits between those two heights that we've identified as the adjacent buildings. And now I'm going to pass on the landscape to design to my colleague and associate, Michael Peruzzi.
Thank you, Henry. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present our design for the streetscape public realm of this new development. My name is Michael Persuti. I'm the principal landscape architect with MEP Design and working with Stafford and their team on the proposal. In our submission, we're focused on the streetscape and public realm improvements of the two main street frontages, being Lombard Street on the northern limit of the site and Adelaide Street on the southern limit of the site, as illustrated in the streetscape reference plan. In the two subsequent slides, we have provided a section sketch to illustrate the main principles of our design approach. If you can please, Henry, slide down to the next one. So firstly, I'd like to walk you through the streetscape design for Lombard Street. The current building, as already stated, is located at 0 setback to the property line, and as illustrated on the section drawing, the new building is proposed to be set back to offer an improvement to the current sidewalk widths and new opportunities for enhanced pedestrian clearways. Henry and his team has incorporated also a canopy detail off the facade to facilitate design for comfort in conjunction with new proposed street tree that enhances the existing street tree planting adjacent to the site, just to the west. As we move towards the Adelaide streetscape, if you could please scroll to the next slide. The current building is also located at 0 setback to the property line, which is illustrated on this section, the property line limit. The new building is again proposed to be set back to offer substantial improvement to the current sidewalk widths and further opportunities for enhanced pedestrian clearways. The architectural team again has incorporated a canopy detail off the building face to facilitate design for comfort from weather, and also to introduce a pedestrian scaled architectural element to the facade in conjunction with the new proposed street trees that will enhance the existing street tree planting fronting on and adjacent to the site. Both the streetscape improvements and architectural nuances are working towards a complete streets approach to enhancing the pedestrian public realm. And they're summarized in these 5 design principles that we use to incorporate into the streetscape design. The first is creating an expanded public realm. Our top priority is accessibility and mobility for all users, regardless of the physical abilities or age. By working closely with our team and Stafford, we adjusted the building setbacks to create an enhanced pedestrian clearway. This ensures clear, direct, unobstructed paths of context-sensitive width to accommodate existing and anticipated pedestrian flows, minimizing or removing clutter. Second approach or concept is to provide new placemaking opportunities. So we see the sidewalks as vibrant public places. Our design invites interaction through thoughtfully placed seating, trees, lighting, and gathering areas. These elements are tailored to the street's context again and designed to evolve with changing demands, considering both current and future pedestrian needs, because the adjacent buildings, the streetscape is constrained. The third principle that we try to incorporate into the streetscape design is designing for comfort. We have ensured sidewalks of adequate width, incorporating architectural canopies along the building facade. Our design supports year-round use, with street trees offering shade and protection from sun, rain, wind, and snow. Street elements are carefully arranged to support pedestrian activities and provide a safe buffer for moving traffic and the adjacent cycle track along Adelaide. The fourth principle is providing new green infrastructure. So as we've mentioned a couple of times, we've prioritized the preservation of existing street trees where feasible and introducing new street trees with adequate soil volumes and ensuring the detailed coordination with buried utilities. This green infrastructure enhances the urban environment and it promotes sustainability and pedestrian scale design. And then the fifth and final principle that we're trying to incorporate into our design is embracing the principle of complete streets. The location of sidewalks and street tree planting provides essential buffer zones for pedestrians and cyclists, ensuring the principles of complete streets are integrated into the public realm. Our design, in summary, aims to create a dynamic, inclusive, and sustainable streetscape that enhances the public realm and meets the need of all users of the public and pedestrians. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I'll be happy to engage in any conversation with follow-up questions.
Thank you. Henry, any final notes?
No, I think Michael wrapped it up quite nicely.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move into questions of clarification. Panel, we have 14 minutes for this. If you could please raise your hand and I will call on you. Jim Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned a couple of times in your presentation that the Adelaide street frontage and entrance are intended to be engaging for pedestrians. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what features you think you've incorporated to make this particularly.
I'm sure. Maybe I'll come back to the ground floor plan, please. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So as you can appreciate, we've got a 31.9 meter frontage along the south end, which is quite a narrow frontage for accommodating required exiting and other features. But what we have done is allowed for a significant amount of the frontage to have retail. We've set back the retail between the piers, so there's actually a 4.8 meter clearway between the edge of the curb to the doors, and allow for frontage into that retail unit, which effectively comes up to the upper level. The lobby for a building of this scale, it needs to be fairly good size. So what we've done is we've allowed for as much glazing as we can afford along that frontage, which you can see two of those large bays, and the last one is really just reserved for the functional aspects of the building. So we anticipate to see a lot of activity coming out of those buildings as they engage the park, retail, and there's also opportunity for some engagement on Lombard Street with the office, the smaller office entrance that connects to the second floor.
Jim, did you have any follow-up to that? No. Moving on to Olivia.
Thanks. I have two questions. The first, just building on the retail, can you describe how you envision that entrance working? It looks like you come into a lobby and then you have to enter the retail separately. It just seems to cut off the activity. So I'm wondering what the rationale is behind that.
So effectively, you're coming in, you have an opportunity to come up an elevator, which engages you into the larger space. What we've done is shown a placeholder for what could be a feature stair. That feature stair could also work equally well coming up from this area up into the space. We usually kind of reserve that for the tenancy, but effectively what we've allowed for is opportunity to come into the space and then immediately have bring yourself up vertically within the mezzanine level, which is really going to be a good chunk of the footprint in the usable space. And there's a little bit of a great differentiation there that we've made just to address some of the grades that you see on the north side of the site. But all of that would be kind of fleshed out in a little bit more detail once we have once they engage with the tenant and understand a little bit more of the programming.
Thanks. And my second question is, can you confirm there's no parking provided and what's the rationale for that?
So there, at this point, there's no parking being provided. The rationale really is that we're within walking distance to these 4 subway stations and plenty of alternative modes of transportation. It's something that the client has seen that they're not. They felt that from a marketing perspective, that most people that are going to be in this area would more than likely be walking. It's a pedestrian area or taking transit. There's other legislation that's kind of not in place here yet, but is in place provincially that basically allows no parking in any area that's in close proximity to high-level transit. It's not officially in place on this site yet, but it's something that is going to likely be adopted once some of those transit areas are officially adopted by the city. So that's part of the reasoning for no parking being proposed on the site.
Thank you.
Heather.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The materiality, so is it like a silver or gray metal?
Yeah, so what we're proposing would first you'd have the perforated metal that would be silver. And then the concept was to bring that materiality through the podium because you effectively have 3 steps. So we have the lower podium and basically the body of the building and as we work up to the tower. So the idea was to allow for those 2 to have a continuity in the materiality between them and a connection. Sometimes we've seen, buildings that have different materials at the base. Because there are effectively 3 parts, we felt that in order to kind of create a continuity with the tower and the base, that we would adopt that silver metal through the body of the building as well.
And is it a window wall building that's being proposed?
It's a combination. So we'll have window wall as a portion of the tower. But what we're doing is a little bit of a hybrid where we're going to end up having some metal panel below that so that you can insulate that at a much higher level than what you could do with a typical spandrel panel. That's all of those areas are hidden from view. Like you wouldn't see that in the rendering because they're hidden behind the balconies. Mm-hmm. There's a number of other sustainable features that we're doing to kind of overcome the window wall system in terms from a sustainability standpoint. We're using geothermal on the project. There's a low window to wall ratio and other ERVs, other things that are trying to compensate for the limitations of that system.
Okay. And do you guys have a professional planner on your team?
Yes, it's Bousfield.
Bousfield, okay. And I'm just wondering if I'm reading the plan correctly. I just want to make sure. So your separation distances from what you've proposed to the northwest vary. The existing 2 buildings at the northwest and the northeast. At the northwest, the distances vary from between 10.4 meters and 17.4 meters at the maximum.
Correct, to the tower.
And then, yeah, and then at the northeast, it's a variation between 13.4 meters and 16.6 meters.
Correct. And
Okay.
as I said, those were the shape of, except for that bump out on the east, the shape of that tower was adopted from the previous application as there was engagement with the community and the city on determining some portions of that boundary.
Right, in plan only, because the heights have increased significantly, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, okay. All right,
Agreed.
thank you.
Jim Melvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of quick questions. On one of your plans, you indicate, this goes back a bit to the parking, you indicate parking on Adelaide. Is that going to happen? Is that part of your proposal? That plan right in front of you that you have up now says 10 parking, what does it say?
Parking on that.
Oh, Jim, I think that refers to bike parking.
10 publicly accessible. That's bike parking?
Yes, if there's any reference to parking, then what there's as far, and Michael, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a requirement for 10 accessible bike spaces for the city's use, in addition to the 660, I think, that we have to provide on ours. So, but Michael, by all means, take that question.
Yeah, no, that's correct. That's the only reference to parking on Adelaide.
Okay, I misunderstood your note then. On the section, on the landscape section, I think it was page 25 on Adelaide, it indicated a bikeway. Is that part of your plan? Is that part of the city's plan to have a bike lane? Yeah, that one, right?
That's the current condition, actually. Previously, I think when we started the application, the bike lane was on the south side, and now it's been moved to the north side. So that's in place as of today.
Oh, okay. So the increase that we're seeing in both your 2.1 meter clearways are not wholly inside the street line. Your 2.1 extends onto private property. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that counted as you presented a enhanced public zone?
So we're actually doing that on a number of sites throughout the city, and logistically, my understanding is it becomes part of an easement agreement with the city. But the reality is, as you know, like, people can't discern between a legal property limit, so they'll have full use to the building facade essentially, right? And that's kind of what we were emphasizing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Aledia, I see that you have joined the meeting. Are you intending, would you be participating in the comments? And if so, I need to ask you if you have a conflict. I can't see you, but okay. I'm going to assume no. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm just going to do a reiteration of key information about the project. A scheme for this site was first presented in 2021 by a different architect and I believe a different ownership. The DRP comments at that time were that some of them, were that the setbacks needed further development and a better response to the heritage context was needed. The current proposal is 65 stories, close to 209.6 meters, where the existing permitted heights on Adelaide are 23 meters and 30 meters on Lombard. FSI proposes 28.41 and the GFA is 37,000 square meters, just over. The original design was 35 stories with an FSI of 14.23 or 32, and the GFA of 18,700 square meters. Proposed uses for this proposal are residential office, small office component, and retail uses. There is no vehicular car parking proposed. We're going to move into panel discussion. Once again, panel, we have 40 minutes for that. So that would mean 8 minutes each, but you do not need to feel that you need to fill that time. So we are going to go in the following order, please. Jim Goff, Jessica Hutchin, Olivia, Heather, and Jim Melvin. Jim Goff, if you could start us off, please. Oh, and just to remember, again to remind you of the questions that were given to us by the city.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentations. I think there's relatively little to say with respect to transportation. The proposed access arrangement via Lombard Street is entirely logical. You don't want to interrupt the bike access along Adelaide. And I'm sure the proponent's transportation consultant has provided a good rationale for the lack of parking proposed on site. And I support that choice. There certainly is a wealth of transit access existing and proposed around the site, as well as so many destinations you can walk to. You really shouldn't need a car if you're living at this location. But I do want to just add a quick word about pedestrian accommodation. I don't see the design as being particularly engaging for pedestrians. And I think that's important given the number of residents you will be accommodating here. We're talking about a lot of people flocking onto a 2.1 meter sidewalk of a few meters in length. So I really don't believe that the design, featuring big plate glass windows provide any physical kind of enhancement of the pedestrian experience. I think there could be a much more engaging and sheltered entrance space to the kind of focus access on pedestrians and make sure they're kind of made to feel welcome and accommodated well. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jessica.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. The site, while relatively small, really does exist in such an important location north of the St. Lawrence neighborhood and adjacent to St. James Park. And for many, this block is almost like a gateway when traveling east, into what was the original 10 blocks, or some call it the east side. But, when you're traveling east and you cross Church Street, the texture of the built form changes and the park sort of jumps out at you. And then finally, when you sort of get to Jarvis and the alignment of Adelaide changes, it's sort of that gateway experience sort of is complete. So it's a really interesting block in that regard. With regards to the public realm immediately adjacent to the site, there's really not much to be done in the streetscape. Conditions are tight. They're limited by all of the existing conditions, which we've talked about. And you've been able to accommodate for that slight increase on Adelaide to give that additional space for the 2.1. I would agree with Jim's comments there about thinking about flows of people and time of day and usage, and what happens when everybody's leaving to get to work at 8:30 or something like that, and how does that flow come out of the building and into the public realm. The impact of the podium on Adelaide to the public realm of St. James Park is concerning to me. I find the scale to be imposing, almost feeling like it's looming over the park. The ground floor seems taller than other retail offerings in this block, and the upper limit of what I sort of understand to be the podium just visually is taller than 90 Adelaide, 2 properties west. And I think furthermore, the material selection being sort of materials unfamiliar to the neighborhood sort of exaggerate this feeling when you're looking at it from the park, and that street wall suddenly feels quite interrupted. The Lombard scale of the podium on that side relates much more, I find, to the adjacent buildings, although I'm not sure a narrow canopy located at the height, or at the high height it was shown at, provides much protection to pedestrians below. I'd maybe study that a bit more. Yeah, so generally, I think a really important block in the city, I would maybe expect a proposal with an exterior expression more related to and in tune perhaps with the character of this really important neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I agree with other panel members. I think this is a really difficult site to navigate and a really important site facing St. James Park. I would agree. I find the architectural expression quite aggressive and not really relating to the context in terms of the massing or materiality. I think this concept of borrowing the language from the cathedral, which is intended to be a centerpiece for the neighborhood and maybe in some ways even muscular, and applying that to a condo building, I don't know if that's an appropriate move. So I would sort of reconsider that. And I agree with Jim. I struggle to believe that the way that the building is laid out is really going to activate the street. I think the flow of people coming in and out along Adelaide, and then the Lombard Street frontage being mainly servicing, I think this development needs to be able to give a lot more to the neighborhood, considering what it is asking for in terms of height. I have some concern with the spatial inefficiency of some of the spaces, and understanding it's still early, I would still recommend trying to lay out some of the units and the amenity spaces, which end up being sort of very long and narrow, some having very irregular shapes, just to make sure that these are spaces that work and that they're livable. I think the situation with where windows are is very complex, so making sure people can get adequate daylight. I think laying these spaces out would be really helpful. From an energy standpoint, I appreciate that you included energy modeling results in your package. We rarely get that, and I applaud you for doing this exercise early on. I think we can see from the results that you're sort of barely squeaking by. I think your thermal energy demand is just barely compliant, and I think that's a risk to the project. I think it's clear to see why your building form is so complex and so irregular. There's so much glazing, you have so much continuous balconies. So I think rather than trying to compensate for this with other features, I think start from first principles, really simplify your building form. And we are demolishing an existing building on this site, so you're already in a carbon deficit. So let's try and do a bit better in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you for the presentation. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. I'm quite aligned with the comments that Jessica made. I believe that the project, just design-wise and with respect to architectural expression, is very overscaled for what is existing on that block. There's no regard for adjacent datums or materiality. The building does not use any kind of scaled elements to speak to the fact that it's a residential use. And I find that the scale just generally kind of out of scale and very coarse for where it's located in the block. I would suggest a block long elevation study and starting to pay attention to some of those adjacent datums and maybe look at, you know, breaking down the scale of this with smaller elements. I also wonder about the materiality that's been chosen, and would encourage some exploration with perhaps more noble materials like brick and other materials that are present in that neighborhood. I also on page 20, the expression for the balconies really makes the building appear thicker and fatter at the top. And to my eye, it appears to be quite top heavy. So instead of disappearing or fading towards the sky, this building is appearing to increase. And I find that to be not in keeping with this idea of kind of taper that you're doing at the base of the building. So maybe there's a way of increasing the design dialogue between those two elements and looking at the building tapering towards the sky. I also found in the package that there weren't enough views of the kind of stepping that happens on the north. You can barely see a little bit of it in one of the views, but it would be good to be able to see more of that. with respect to some planning comments. I think you probably noted the prior concerns that the panel had with respect to setbacks. And I would say that all of those, in my opinion, have just been, the level of concern has just gone up because the increase in density and height that you've proposed. So, I'm not sure what the planning rationale would be for not adhering to any of the tall building guideline setbacks on the east and west. It would have been great to hear that maybe from your planner, as well as the proposed densities. It's the 28.4 FSI is very high for this area. So to be able to see some examples of other buildings that are approaching that density would be helpful, because we're not aware of any of those. And I think those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. It falls to me at this point then to make a summary of the points of consensus, and with keeping the staff's questions in mind.
Wait a minute, Meg.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jim, I'm so sorry. Right, you were an ad. Please, go
No
ahead.
problem. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I agree with my fellow review panelists' comments, and I think the improvement you're providing to the public realm on Adelaide might be enhanced if you remove some of the decorative columns that you are showing to move them inbound of the building face, thus giving a full width of, 4,800 to the pedestrians. And I can appreciate trying to reflect the cathedral, St. James Cathedral, in some architectural style, but what I would really prefer would be a perspective as you're showing on the right here in this drawing, but with the cathedral in the foreground and this building in context with the cathedral. The cathedral is a major piece of urban architecture in this area, and when you're going to these heights and you're doing this belcatecture kind of style, I think it's going to be really a distraction from the lines of the church. And I think you should be considerate of what the church and how this building is set in context with it. On the Lombard north side, there's not much you can really do. I do appreciate the little extension of the 2.1 into your area, even though it's bounded by existing buildings on the east and west. I think best would be somehow to again remove those pieces of structure or decorative structure on your columns and create a little better space. Very difficult site. I think you're working in the right direction, but I believe, as Jim mentioned right at the start, the more public realm space you can make available, the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. I think Jessica put it well when she began by speaking about this as a gateway location. Traveling east to the original city blocks of York and Toronto, and the smaller scale that characterizes that area, but also the materiality of that area. And others have spoken about the church, St. James Cathedral, across from the site. Both of these, but also the larger neighborhood, are significant are significant pieces of our urban fabric and our cultural history and our cultural fabric, none of which have appeared in any substantive way in the presentation, nor are they reflected in the architecture. And with respect, that is a significant issue with the present design. To dig into that a little bit, with some of the points that were raised by the panel, the expression of the architecture is aggressive and unrelated to the context. The building materials exacerbate and amplify the disconnect of the building massing and design from the neighborhood. The vertical elements on the podium do not recall or align with the buttresses of St. James or the local mansard roofs. In essence, or in summary, a different architectural expression is required. This is a building that will be here for decades and decades and decades. And no matter what happens around it, this St. James will remain, and the original blocks will remain. And this building must speak to those, and must speak to the greater fabric around the building, or around the neighborhood and around the context. That is a must. A suggestion that you consider more noble materials such as brick in this regard. Moving on, that's architectural expression, but it segues, it's largely expression vis-a-vis the neighborhood and the St. Lawrence HCD, but it segues into the relationship between the building massing and the neighborhood buildings in scale, podium height, and setbacks. The panel felt that the building was overscaled and coarse in its expression and massing, and that the balconies make the building feel thicker instead of tapered, which is as it goes towards the top. A point was made, and I think it's really germane and on point, that now that the building is taller and proposed to be much taller and of greater density, the setbacks discussed with the original proposal are no longer apply or are sufficient. From a public realm perspective, which is say building setback, a boulevard setback, podium scale, ground floor uses, and streetscape and planting, the panel felt that this was not an engaging or accommodating design for pedestrians. It needs thorough redesign, just flat out. And a suggestion to that end was to move the exterior piers inside the envelope to give the sidewalk greater width, acknowledging that you are on it's a downtown site. But whatever can be done to make that ground floor pedestrian realm more accommodating, more welcoming, and more generous is needed. With respect to St. James Park and its relationship there too, the scale is imposing. Panel felt that the proposed design just simply looms over the park in a way that is unacceptable. From a transportation perspective, the Lombard access is rational and reasonable. And from a sustainability perspective, the quantity of glazing, the complex building form, and the continuous balconies need reconsideration as you move forward in the design exercise. This project is subject to a vote. And so Leanne, if you could please put the vote slide up.
The vote is intended to provide emphasis and clarity to the discussion and an indication of how well the project advances the panel's mandate of promoting design excellence. Support means that the project meets the relevant design excellence objectives. The panel advises that the project should continue in the proposed direction and include refinements that were recommended during the review. This option can be made with key conditions if so desired by the panel. Non-support means that the project does not meet fundamental design excellence objectives. The panel advises that the project should be substantially redesigned to address the issues identified during the discussion.
It's possible that a vote of support can be made with key conditions if the panel desires. Do any of the panel members have a condition to propose? Heather, I see that your hand is up, but I think that might be from before. Okay. Seeing none, therefore we'll just move right into the vote. As I call your name, please let us know how you vote. Jim Goff,
Non-support.
Jessica Hutchin,
Non-support.
Olivia Keung,
Non-support.
Heather Rolston,
Non-support.
Jim Melvin.
Non-support.
Thank you to the panel and to the proponents in the city for bringing this project. We understand that it's early in the process, but on such a key site, we're very grateful for the opportunity to meet with you and to review the progress on the project to date. It really is, it really is a prominent site, and it's one that, as mentioned before, it's one that's a building that will be here for many decades to come. So we deeply and sincerely encourage you to take our review into consideration as you move forward, and we look forward to seeing the project at a later stage of its development. That concludes today's DRP session, and we, again, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your participation and for the work that you brought to the panel today.
Thanks
Thank you
for everybody and their comments, and we'll take them all into consideration as we move forward.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.